The morning reports came in like whispers of death. Station after station, colony after colony, all across the Outer Rim territories, silent. Captain Marcus Webb stared at the communication board aboard his patrol ship, watching as red indicators spread across the star map like a disease. "Sir, New Terra is not responding," reported Lieutenant Kate Morris from her console. "That's the 15th human settlement in 2 days." Marcus rubbed his tired eyes. 3 months of this. 3 months of human colonies simply going dark without explanation. No distress signals, no emergency broadcasts, no requests for evacuation assistance. One day they were there, conducting normal business and trade. The next day, nothing. Any signs of attack? Pirate activity? Natural disasters? Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer. Kate shook her head. "Nothing, sir. The few alien traders who visited these places report the same thing. Empty stations, abandoned settlements, but no signs of struggle. Like everyone just left." The Galactic Council was growing concerned, but not for the reasons Marcus had hoped. The disappearing humans were disrupting trade routes and leaving valuable mining operations unmanned. 17 different alien species had filed formal complaints about broken contracts and abandoned business agreements. On the bridge of the Council flagship Unity, Councillor Thane examined the reports with growing irritation. The crystalline being's facete body reflected the light from dozens of status displays, each one showing another human settlement gone silent. Typical human behavior, Thane clicked to his aide. When faced with minor economic pressure, they flee like frightened animals instead of negotiating proper solutions. The aide, a smaller crystal creature, flickered nervously. "But sir, the scale of this evacuation is unprecedented. They've abandoned territories worth trillions of credits." Thane waved a dismissive appendage. "Humans are emotional creatures. Probably some kind of cultural panic response. They'll return when their hysteria passes." But on the abandoned mining station of Kepler 7, there was no sign of panic. Commander James Mitchell walked through the empty corridors with a team of alien investigators. Everything was in perfect order. Machinery properly shut down, facilities cleaned and maintained, personal belongings removed with care. "Strange," muttered Vex, the Beta Centauri investigator. "This doesn't look like an emergency evacuation." James stopped at a metal wall panel near the main exit. Someone had used industrial tools to carve words deep into the steel. "We tried to warn you. It's awake now." "What does that mean?" Vex asked. James stared at the message, his face pale. "I don't know. But knowing humans, it probably means we should be worried." The pattern was the same everywhere. From the farming colonies of Vega Prime to the research stations orbiting distant gas giants, every human settlement told the same story. Careful, planned evacuations with no explanation except those cryptic warnings carved into metal where they couldn't be easily erased. Dr. Emily Harrison had spent her career studying ancient civilizations, but now she found herself documenting the disappearance of a living one. Standing in the empty corridors of Science Station Alpha, she recorded her observations for the Council investigation. Personal effects removed systematically. Databanks wiped clean but not destroyed. No signs of violence or coercion. The evacuation appears to have been voluntary and well organized. She paused her recording as she discovered another carved message: "The hunger awakes. We cannot save those who will not listen." Emily had heard whispers about human archaeological teams making disturbing discoveries in recent years. Ancient ruins, extinct civilizations, warnings about something terrible. But the Council had dismissed such reports as human superstition and attention-seeking behavior. Admiral Robert Stone reviewed the latest intelligence reports from his hidden command center deep in the Oort cloud. Around him, the most senior human military officers studied holographic displays showing the successful completion of Operation Silent Departure. 6 billion people relocated without a single major incident, reported Colonel Diana Foster. The cover stories held. Most alien observers believe we're simply consolidating populations for economic efficiency. Robert nodded grimly. And the warnings? Placed as ordered, sir. Every abandoned facility carries the message. Whether they'll listen. Diana shrugged helplessly. They won't, Robert said quietly. They never have. The evacuation had taken 3 years of secret planning. False mining reports, fake corporate restructuring announcements, staged economic difficulties, anything to mask the largest population movement in galactic history. Humanity was fleeing to prepared refuges in dead systems and rogue planets, places where they could wait and watch. Meanwhile, on the Council homeworld, the alien leaders debated humanity's strange behavior. In the Grand Assembly Hall, representatives from dozens of species discussed the implications of the human exodus. Perhaps they've discovered something valuable and wish to keep it secret, suggested Councillor Yax of the Rigel Collective. More likely they're trying to manipulate galactic markets, replied Thane. Humans are known for their deceptive economic strategies. Only a few voices expressed concern about the warnings left behind, but they were quickly shouted down by the majority who saw human fears as primitive and unfounded. Dr. Patricia Young monitored deep space sensors from humanity's hidden sanctuary, watching for the signs that human scientists dreaded. In the Draco sector, around a neutron star that most species didn't even know existed, ancient containment systems were failing after millions of years. How long? Asked her assistant, Dr. Mark Thompson. Patricia checked her calculations again, hoping she was wrong. 18 months. Maybe less. The entity that had once consumed entire galactic civilizations was stirring in its prison. Humanity had found the warnings left by its previous victims and tried desperately to alert other species about the coming danger. But pride and prejudice had made the galaxy deaf to human concerns. Now humans could only wait in their hidden refuges, watching as an ancient evil prepared to wake and wondering if their desperate preparations would be enough to save a galaxy that refused to save itself. The silence was complete. Where once human voices had filled the communication networks with trade discussions and diplomatic correspondence, now there was only emptiness. And in that emptiness, something old and terrible was beginning to stir. 6 years before the Great Silence, Dr. Thomas Grant brushed centuries of dust from an ancient stone tablet. His hands trembled as alien symbols became clear under the artificial lights of the underground chamber. The dead world of Kepler 442c held secrets that made his heart race with both excitement and fear. Emily, you need to see this immediately, Thomas called to his partner across the vast underground space. Dr. Emily Harrison emerged from behind a collapsed pillar, her scanner beeping frantically in her hands. The chamber stretched into darkness beyond their lights. Every wall, every surface, every piece of stone carried the same desperate message written in dozens of different languages. Most of these languages belonged to species that had died millions of years ago. The dating is consistent, Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. This civilization died out 3.2 million years ago, but these warnings, they're all about the same thing. Professor William Hayes looked up from his translation work at a portable table. The elderly linguist's face was white with shock. His hands shook as he pointed to the symbols covering the walls around them. It's not just one warning, William said slowly. It's thousands. Every single surface in this place carries the same message in different languages. They all say the same thing: the hunger awakes when stars grow cold. The archaeological team worked in 12-hour shifts for 3 weeks. Captain Daniel Foster, their military escort, watched nervously as the scientists uncovered more and more disturbing information. The story that emerged from the ancient texts was like something from humanity's worst nightmares. An ancient species called the predecessors had ruled the galaxy millions of years ago. They were advanced beyond anything the current galactic civilizations could imagine. But they had encountered something that nearly destroyed everything, a creature that fed on conscious thought itself. According to these records, William explained to the team during their evening briefing, this thing doesn't eat planets or steal resources. It consumes the minds of entire civilizations. It feeds on organized thought, on intelligence, on everything that makes a species more than just animals. Emily studied the star charts carved deep into the chamber walls. Her archaeological training helped her understand the three-dimensional maps showing star positions from millions of years ago. They fought it for 10,000 years, she said, tracing the battle lines marked on the ancient charts. But they couldn't destroy it. The best they could do was trap it somehow. Thomas pointed to detailed technical drawings that covered an entire wall. Even with their advanced scientific knowledge, the human team could barely understand what they were looking at. They built a prison around a neutron star, Thomas explained. Used the massive gravitational field and some kind of technological binding system to keep the creature contained. Captain Foster leaned forward. Where is this prison located? William checked his translation notes and compared them to modern star charts. In the Draco sector. The neutron star we now call NSR 4471. The discovery should have changed everything. When the team returned to Earth, they immediately requested an emergency session with the Galactic Council. Captain Marcus Webb, newly promoted and eager to prove himself, was assigned to escort the archaeological team to the council chambers. The presentation was a complete disaster from the first moment. The Grand Council chamber, carved from a single asteroid and decorated with banners from 47 different species, erupted in laughter when William began explaining their findings. Ancient monsters in space prisons, Counselor Thane clicked dismissively, his crystalline body flashing with amusement. Your species has such creative imaginations. Perhaps you should write fiction instead of claiming to do science. Dr. Emily Harrison activated her holographic display, showing the alien symbols and their translations. These warnings appear in 43 different extinct languages. The consistency of the message across multiple species and time periods suggests dash. It suggests humans are very good at creating elaborate hoaxes, interrupted Counselor Vex of the Beta Centauri Alliance. Your species sees monsters in shadows and creates grand conspiracies to explain simple natural phenomena. Thomas tried to present the technical specifications they had found, the detailed plans showing how the predecessors had constructed their prison. But the council members weren't interested in listening. They whispered among themselves, treating the human presentation like entertainment. Primitive superstition, declared Thane loudly. Your species has barely mastered faster than light travel and you claim to understand the work of mythical ancient civilizations. Only Admiral Elizabeth Parker, Earth's military representative, understood the gravity of what the archaeological team had discovered. She sat silently during the presentation, watching the council's reaction with growing horror. After the failed presentation, Elizabeth called a private meeting with Earth's highest government officials. President Jonathan Clark listened carefully as she explained what the archaeological team had really found. If they won't listen to warnings, Elizabeth told the assembled leaders, we have to prepare as if we're the only ones who know what's coming. Dr. William Hayes spent months double-checking his translations, hoping he had made some terrible mistake. But every test confirmed the same horrifying truth. The prison holding the ancient creature was slowly failing after millions of years, and no other species in the galaxy would help humanity reinforce it. The gravitational readings from NSR 4471 show increasing instability, reported Dr. Michael Turner, Earth's top astrophysicist. If these ancient texts are correct, we have perhaps 2 years before complete containment failure. The Silence Protocol was born in those secret meetings. If humanity couldn't convince other species to help prevent the disaster, then humans would have to survive it alone. Plans began for the largest evacuation in galactic history. 6 billion people relocated to hidden refuges without alerting the other species who had rejected their warnings. We tried to save them, President Clark said quietly during the final planning session. History will remember that we tried. But Admiral Parker knew better. If the ancient warnings proved true, there might not be anyone left to remember anything at all. The archaeological team's discovery had revealed humanity's greatest nightmare, and their greatest responsibility. Dr. Michael Turner stared at his computer screen in disbelief. The numbers couldn't be right. He ran the calculations again, then a third time, hoping for different results. But the gravitational readings from neutron star NSR 4471 remained the same. The ancient prison was breaking down faster than anyone had predicted. Admiral Parker, you need to see this immediately, Michael said into his emergency communicator. His voice shook as he transmitted the data to Earth's Defense Command. Within an hour, Admiral Elizabeth Parker stood in the Deep Space Observatory, studying the readings herself. Around her, Earth's top scientists and military leaders gathered in the cramped control room. The atmosphere was tense with barely controlled panic. The containment field is collapsing, Michael explained, pointing to the energy signatures on his display. At this rate, we have maybe 18 months before complete failure. Maybe less. President Jonathan Clark sat heavily in his chair. The weight of 6 billion human lives pressed down on his shoulders. Have we made any progress with the Council? Ambassador Helen Crawford shook her head grimly. She had just returned from her 5th unsuccessful diplomatic mission to the galactic capital. They refused to even discuss the issue. 3 species have formally complained about human harassment. They claim we're trying to manipulate them with fear tactics. Captain Lisa Morgan, Earth's top military strategist, activated a tactical display showing defensive positions around human space. We've run every possible combat scenario. Conventional weapons are completely useless against something operating on this scale. According to the predecessor warnings, this creature can manipulate matter and energy at the quantum level. What about their containment methods? Asked Dr. Susan Wright, Earth's chief scientist. Can we repair or reinforce their prison somehow? Professor William Hayes, now Earth's leading expert on predecessor technology, looked exhausted. He had spent 3 years trying to decode ancient technical specifications that were millions of years beyond human science. We've managed to understand maybe 5% of their technology, William admitted. Their science was so far ahead of ours that we can barely recognize what we're looking at. It's like asking a caveman to repair a spacecraft. Admiral Parker leaned forward. But you found something. I can see it in your face. William nodded reluctantly. One possibility. The predecessor texts mentioned something called the Great Wounding. It's not a way to kill the creature, but a method to damage it badly enough to force it back into hibernation. The room fell silent. Everyone waited for the terrible news they knew was coming. The cost is... William struggled to find words. It requires the deliberate destruction of multiple star systems. The energy release from coordinated stellar collapse can wound the creature's distributed consciousness structure. President Clark felt the blood drain from his face. How many systems? At minimum? 17 different stars would need to be destroyed simultaneously. Everything within 50 light-years of each detonation point would be sterilized completely. The implications hit everyone at once. They were talking about sacrificing huge areas of human space, colonies, mining operations, research stations, everything humanity had built beyond the Sol system. Captain Edward Reynolds, head of evacuation planning, spoke quietly. The outer colonies. We'd have to abandon every human settlement in the target zones. How long do we have once this thing breaks free? President Clark asked. Dr. Michael Turner consulted his worst-case projections. Based on the predecessor records, it targets the most technologically advanced civilizations first. It will consume the Council's core worlds within days. After that, it spreads exponentially through the hyperspace trade routes. Admiral Parker stood and looked out at the stars visible through the observatory's main window. Somewhere out there, an ancient evil was stirring in its weakening prison. And humanity was the only species that believed in the danger. We implement the silence protocol, she said finally. Full evacuation begins immediately. Ambassador Crawford looked worried. The other species will panic if they see us abandoning our territories en masse. They won't see it that way, replied Captain Reynolds. We've spent 2 years preparing cover stories. Mining depletion reports, corporate restructuring announcements, voluntary relocation programs. To outside observers, it will look like normal economic activity spread over several years. President Clark made the hardest decision in human history. Execute the silence protocol. Begin the evacuation. And may whatever gods are listening forgive us for what we're about to do. Across human space, the evacuation began immediately. Transport ships that had been secretly prepared for months suddenly appeared at colonies with official relocation orders. Families packed their belongings, believing they were moving to better opportunities in more developed systems. Dr. Richard Stone coordinated the refugee fleets from a hidden command center. He watched as ship after ship departed from human worlds, carrying everything that remained of human civilization toward secret sanctuaries in dead systems and rogue planets. 6 billion people, he whispered to his assistant, Lieutenant Colonel James Anderson. We're abandoning everything we've built over the past 3 centuries. To save everything that could still be built in the future, James replied. The evacuation moved like clockwork. False mining reports explained why profitable operations were shutting down. Fake corporate mergers justified population transfers. Staged economic difficulties masked the systematic abandonment of humanity's greatest achievements. In each evacuated facility, maintenance teams left the same message carved deep into metal surfaces: we tried to warn you. It's awake now. Other species noticed the human exodus but dismissed it as typical human emotional instability. The Galactic Council even passed a resolution condemning human economic manipulation tactics. Admiral Robert Stone, commanding the evacuation fleets, received the final reports as the last transport ships departed from the outer colonies. Millions of humans were now hidden in prepared refuges, waiting for an ancient nightmare to wake up. All evacuation zones cleared, he reported to Admiral Parker. Phase 1 of the silence protocol is complete. Now came the hardest part, waiting in hidden refuges while the galaxy learned why humanity had tried so desperately to warn them. The neutron star NSR 4471 collapsed its containment field on a Tuesday morning, Galactic Standard Time. Dr. Patricia Young was monitoring the deep space sensors from humanity's hidden sanctuary when her equipment suddenly went completely insane. Numbers flashed across her screens that shouldn't have been possible. It's free, she whispered into her emergency communicator, her hands shaking as she transmitted the readings. Admiral Parker, the prison has failed. It's free. Admiral Elizabeth Parker received the message in the command center of Haven Station, humanity's largest hidden refuge built inside a rogue planet drifting in the empty space between stars. Around her, thousands of human refugees waited in underground cities, not knowing that their worst fears had just come true. All stations, this is command, Elizabeth broadcast to every hidden human settlement. Condition Black is now active. Complete communication silence with all non-human vessels. Everyone stays hidden until further orders. The entity that the ancient predecessors had called the Hunger stretched senses that had been confined for 3 million years. It was not a creature in any normal sense, not flesh and blood, but a pattern of pure consciousness that could reshape matter and energy as easily as humans could move their hands. Its first sensation was hunger. Endless, terrible hunger for the one thing it craved above all else, organized thought. The complex, beautiful patterns of conscious minds working together in civilizations. Councillor Thane was in the middle of an important trade negotiation when his homeworld of Altair Prime simply stopped. Every computer network dissolved into base elements. Every artificial intelligence went silent. Every technological system that the crystalline beings used to enhance their natural thought processes collapsed instantly. The hunger fed not on bodies or energy, but on the organized consciousness that made civilizations possible. Each mind it consumed added to its own growing intelligence and power. The crystalline beings of Altair Prime, who depended on technological enhancement for their advanced thinking, died in moments as their consciousness was absorbed. Captain David Mitchell monitored communications from humanity's deep space listening posts, hidden in the outer darkness beyond any star system. He watched helplessly as species after species simply vanished from galactic communications. The Beta Centauri Alliance has gone silent, he reported to Admiral Parker. No response from the Vegan Confederacy. Even the machine intelligences of the Rigel Collective have stopped transmitting. The entity moved through space faster than any ship, following the hyperspace trade routes that connected every major civilization. It had learned these patterns during its long imprisonment, studying the electromagnetic signatures of the galaxy's current inhabitants. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, humanity's expert on the creature, tracked its movement from the safety of the hidden research station. It's following exactly the same pattern the predecessor warnings described. It targets the most technologically advanced civilizations first because they have the most organized thought patterns to consume. The Galactic Council's Grand Meeting Hall, once a symbol of unity among 4 to 7 different species, now served as a processing node in the entity's expanding consciousness. The magnificent chamber carved from a single asteroid had been converted into something that hurt to look at directly, a twisted structure of matter that existed partially outside normal spacetime. Admiral Robert Stone commanded humanity's hidden fleet from the Bridge of Sanctuary, a massive ship built from the combined resources of Earth's abandoned colonies. His tactical displays showed the creature's expansion as red zones spreading across the galaxy map. How fast is it growing? He asked his strategic analyst. Dr. Mark Thompson ran the calculations on his computer. At current rate, it will consume 90% of all galactic civilization within 6 months. Maybe less if it continues to accelerate. The entity grew stronger and smarter with each world it consumed. Every brilliant scientist, every clever engineer, every creative artist became part of its collective intelligence. It began to understand not just how to consume civilizations, but how to convert their technology and infrastructure into extensions of itself. Commander Sarah Phillips led humanity's reconnaissance division from a hidden outpost near the consumption zone's edge. She watched through long-range sensors as entire star systems were converted into something alien and wrong. It's not just destroying everything, she reported back to command. It's changing the fundamental structure of matter. Every atom of consumed civilization becomes part of its body. It's turning the galaxy into itself. The few alien survivors who managed to escape the initial wave found themselves in a galaxy that no longer made sense. Refugee ships drifted between stars, their crews slowly realizing that the humans had somehow known this would happen. Captain Lisa Morgan intercepted scattered alien transmissions from her listening post. We're receiving messages from survivor groups. They're asking about the human warnings. Some of them are begging us to explain what's happening. Admiral Parker stood before the strategic display in Haven Station's command center. 40% of the galaxy now showed red, completely under the entity's control. The remaining civilizations were scattered and primitive, reduced to Stone Age technology or barely functioning refugee fleets. The core worlds are gone, reported Dr. William Hayes, monitoring the galactic communication networks. The Council, the major trade federations, the advanced research civilizations, all consumed. Only the most primitive species in the Outer Rim territories are still free. Lieutenant Nancy Davis looked up from her communication station. Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the Andromedan observation post. They're asking if we need evacuation assistance. Elizabeth shook her head grimly. Other galaxies had noticed the energy signatures of the entities feeding. They were offering to help humanity escape to safety beyond the galaxy's edge. Negative, she replied. We're not leaving. This is our fight. Because humanity had not spent their hidden years in passive waiting. Deep in secret facilities scattered across dead worlds and rogue planets, human scientists and engineers had been working frantically to understand the one thing the predecessors had discovered: how to wound something that existed as pure consciousness spread across multiple star systems. The real war was about to begin. 1 year after the awakening, the galaxy was dying. Admiral Elizabeth Parker stood in the command center of Haven Station, staring at holographic displays that showed the true scope of the disaster. Red zones covered nearly half the galaxy map, entire sectors converted into extensions of the entity's alien consciousness. Of the 4 to 7 species that had once made up the proud Galactic Council, only 12 survived in scattered groups. Most had been reduced to primitive technology, hiding on forgotten worlds at the galaxy's edge. The great civilizations that had mocked human warnings were nothing but memories absorbed into the hunger's growing mind. Status report, Elizabeth commanded, her voice steady despite the weight of leading humanity's desperate final gambit. Dr. Rachel Green stepped forward, her research uniform bearing the insignia of the predecessor technology division. For the past year, she had worked 18-hour days trying to decode the most dangerous knowledge in galactic history. We've cracked the Great Wounding Protocol, Rachel announced. The predecessors didn't destroy the entity, they hurt it badly enough to force it into hibernation for millions of years. General Andrew Foster, Elizabeth's tactical advisor, leaned over the display table. What's the price for wounding something like that? Rachel's face was grim. 17 star systems. The predecessors used coordinated stellar engineering to create a massive cascade reaction. The energy release damaged the entity's core consciousness structure badly enough to shut it down. Captain Christopher Hayes activated tactical displays showing the target zones. Human colonies that had been evacuated years ago now served as staging grounds for the most desperate military operation in galactic history. We've identified the optimal positions, Christopher explained. If we can replicate the predecessor technique using our current technology, we can wound it enough to send it back into dormancy. For how long? Elizabeth asked. Minimum 1 million years, Rachel replied. Possibly much longer if we do enough damage. Ambassador Margaret Thompson looked up from her communication station. She was now humanity's only remaining diplomatic officer, trying to coordinate with the scattered alien survivor groups. I've made contact with 3 species that still have enough intact technology to help us, Margaret reported. The Rigel survivors, what's left of the Centauri refugees, and a group of Altarian crystal beings who escaped the initial consumption. The others? She paused sadly. The others don't have enough people left to matter. The plan was so audacious it bordered on insanity. Using humanity's abandoned colonies as weapons platforms, they would position antimatter charges at precisely calculated points around 17 different stars. The simultaneous detonation would create gravitational shockwaves that could wound the entity's distributed consciousness. Dr. Benjamin Clark ran the final physics calculations on his quantum computer. The energy release will sterilize every system within 50 light-years of each detonation point. We're talking about permanently destroying our most valuable former territories. Territories we already evacuated, noted Captain Laura Wilson, who commanded the logistics fleet. That's exactly why we abandoned them years ago, to create the battlefield we needed. The alien survivors finally understood the terrible truth. Humanity hadn't fled in cowardice when they abandoned their greatest colonies. They had made the hardest strategic decision imaginable, sacrificing their own prosperity to position weapons that could save the galaxy. 3 months later, Admiral Robert Stone led 17 different assault fleets to their target positions. Each fleet carried antimatter devices powerful enough to collapse a star and the brave crews who would deliver them to precise coordinates. All stations report ready for deployment, announced Commander Victoria Moore from her position aboard the flagship Defiance. The human fleets took positions around 17 star systems that had once been jewels of human expansion. New Terra, with its beautiful crystal cities. Proxima Station, humanity's first successful deep space colony. The mining worlds of the Vega sector that had made Earth wealthy beyond imagination. All of them would die to save a galaxy that had refused to listen to human warnings. Admiral Parker, now commanding from the vessel Hope's End, opened communication channels to every human ship in the operation. Across the galaxy, thousands of volunteers prepared to sacrifice everything. Today we finish what the predecessors started, Elizabeth said into her communicator. We cannot destroy this thing, but we can hurt it enough to give future generations another chance. Execute the great wounding. 17 stars died at exactly the same moment. The coordinated stellar collapse released more energy than some galaxies produced in a year. The gravitational shockwaves raced outward at the speed of light, converging on the entity's core processing nodes. The hunger scream echoed across every dimension of spacetime. Every conscious being in the galaxy felt it as a psychic wail of pure agony and rage. For 3 days, the entity's death cry made normal thought almost impossible. When the energy storm finally ended, humanity emerged from their hidden sanctuaries to survey a transformed galaxy. The entity had been wounded, its distributed consciousness damaged enough to force it into emergency hibernation. But entire sectors now lay empty, their stars extinguished forever. Dr. Peter Mitchell conducted the post-battle analysis from his laboratory aboard Haven Station. It's dormant. The core consciousness has retreated to repair the damage we inflicted. But Rachel's calculations are correct, it will eventually heal and wake up again. The surviving alien species approached humanity with shame and desperate gratitude. They had dismissed human fears as primitive superstition. Now they realized that humanity had been the galaxy's guardians all along, willing to destroy their own achievements to protect civilizations that had mocked them. President Helen Carter addressed the remnant galactic community from Earth's rebuilt capital. We didn't want to be right about this. We would have preferred to be called fools forever if it meant this catastrophe could have been prevented. Admiral Parker stood before the memorial wall that listed every human colony sacrificed in the Great Wounding. We saved the galaxy, she said quietly. But sometimes I wonder if it was worth the cost. The entity slept again, wounded and contained by humanity's ultimate sacrifice. In the empty spaces where human worlds once thrived, automated beacons transmitted a simple message: we tried to warn you. When the stars grow cold again, remember that we kept watch.